Space in the whole body is a really interesting concept because a lot of times people are so focused on singing as just a thing that we do from here. And so when we need to add more power, more pressure, we add that power and pressure from here. But as I've walked through with some of you already, just being in different parts of the body can help to give your body something else to control. Like the default option is to push from somewhere. And if you it's like giving a dog a toy to go play with. Go focus on this instead of the, barking and biting at this thing that I don't want you to bite at. You're giving that need to control to somewhere else in your body that doesn't directly affect the sound making machine. So I like to do those magic tricks that I did in the last video. We're talking about the knee bend, which gets your abs in alignment. You're using your abs in the right way. You're coming from underneath. You're using your lower abdominals and your outer abdominals to get some space, and your inhale, and you're releasing those muscles, and then you have the space to engage them fully so that they can do the work, the hard work that you really need to have a clear, fast air fueled tone. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you need evidence of that, just sing like curled up in a little ball. Like see how that feels. So like just sing a little bit of something like, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Just notice how that feels. And then give yourself a little extra space. Maybe stand up because your body loves that. Give it some space and then bend your knees as you go. And we can feel the difference in where that sound is able to go, what's fueling it, what muscles are able to engage that they weren't when you were in a teeny little ball. So if I do the same thing, standing up and giving lots of space, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. I'm giving it the same amount of power and pressure, but it's so much easier to get that sound out. I'm not hardly doing any work and my sound is going 2 or 3 times as far, having more volume, more power, more pitch correctness, and it's just easier for me in general. So I'm more able to get out of the way when I align my whole body in the correct way. So I like to also think about the whole body aspect as your spine. So your spine is all of these vertebrae stacked on top of one another, and most of the time most of us are hunched over like this, and so the bends in your spine are not curving in the right way. So if you look at this guy right here, you should have a curve and a curve and a curve, and if we're sitting, all of that is just curved this way, like it's one big round curve that way. And so your spine is not able to move as well and as efficiently as it would be able to otherwise. So what we want to do when we're singing is ideally stand up. Of course, you're not always going to be in a position to do that. Like if you're in musical theater and you're in a scene where you have to be sitting, if you're in your car and you're practicing, but ideally we want to get to a place that is as close to standing as possible. So even if you're sitting right now, sit up on the front of a chair, don't lean back on a chair. Let your torso hold itself up. And I want you to imagine your rib cage floating up out of your hips. So there's some space in there, there's some movement in there, there's some upward motion. And then I want you to imagine your shoulders lifting up off of your ribs. So there's some looseness in there. And then I want you to imagine your head lifting up off of your shoulders. So there's a floating happening in each part of your spine, each part of your body. There's a floating feeling, so that even when you're sitting up straight, you don't have to be stiff, right? You don't have to hold on to all those muscles. you can start to feel each of these parts floating on top of one another. And then you realize how much movement naturally happens on a day-to-day basis, in a moment-to-moment basis. And you really notice this if you stand up and you close your eyes and you feel yourself lifting even out of your legs. Your legs are expanding out of you. Your hip joints are loosening and your legs are pulling away. So you're floating on top of your legs, and you'll see how much movement there actually is based on how you can feel the little movements in your feet as you are trying to stand upright. And you can notice what all the work that the toes are doing, all the little teeny movements of the legs and the knees, all the little teeny movements of the rib cage and the torso, and how everything is working together to keep your whole body upright. Singing is the same way. Everything is working together all the time when you are singing, regardless of what position you're in. It's just that when we are singing for long periods of time, we're putting a little more pressure on our voice. We're singing those big songs, those big phrases that we want to sing. We want to give your voice the best environment possible. And so we want to get the whole body into a place where it's aligned and floating so that your system is how it was meant to be, how it was born to be, to make these sounds, right? So of course you can still make noise when you're laying down, when you're folding over, when you're hunched in a little ball. But if we want it to be the ideal situation, the ideal environment for your voice, at least your torso, feel that floatiness, feel that looseness in the motion between all of these parts. So hopefully that makes sense. One of my favorite things to do is just sing in different positions, and you'll start to feel what changes. So like even just that exercise that we did, like hunched over versus sitting and standing up, you can feel, if you really get involved and you are really present in what your larynx is doing, if you just hunch over like you would be at a computer all day, you can see even that my larynx is hanging now in a different way than it was before. It's basically hanging underneath here within your throat. And if you go like this, there's muscles pulling more from the back because you're letting it hang underneath your chin in a diagonal way instead of all the way upright. So you can even feel in that little teeny moment, there's a little more tension in certain places that it wasn't before. And you can try singing in these different places, like really exaggerate it and sing a song here. See if you can do a big belty note and see where tension comes in. And then do the opposite. Lift up your ribs. Imagine somebody has a little string here on the very front of your chest and is pulling up. And so you feel everything kind of just float up into alignment. And then try and sing that same passage from here. Press your feet into the ground, use your abdominals, and see how much easier it feels. And let me know in the comments what you discovered. Let me know if you've discovered any more space in your body that you didn't know existed. Maybe you found more space in your mouth, in your jaw, behind your ears, in your temples. Maybe you found more space in the back of your shoulders with that angel wings exercise from last week. Play with different body alignments and different body shapes and see what changes for the ease and the freedom of your voice. I get a little bit of this from the Alexander technique, which basically is the idea that there is a most efficient way of doing every action. And so when we're singing, we often get into bad habits like this, like when we even stand, sometimes we stand like this, like when we're waiting in line for something, we go, And so we get into these habits of crunched up alignments. And the Alexander technique teaches you how to get back to what the body was intended to do and singing from that space. And this is where I got the idea of singing is a whole body action. Although I think I knew a little bit of this subconsciously before, because learning how to sing in musical theater, when you're walking around a stage, you have to really pay attention to the right way to set your body up, even if you're doing an action that you wouldn't normally do while singing, because that's what musical theater is singing throughout a whole scene of things that you might not normally sing while doing. So it's really good to just look at this from a different perspective. And when you're singing, especially in the car, sometimes we get really hunched over. So practice, this is your number one homework if you're a car singer, is practice pressing your feet into the floor. If you have an automatic car only, if you have a manual, don't do this. But on your left side, there's that space for your foot to go, and you can press into that, and you can feel your abdominals, your lower and your outer abdominals start to engage. And use that while you're singing. Use that while you're singing your big belty notes, while you're singing in your high register. Press into that, and that will get you a little bit closer to standing, even when you're in a car, which is even a stranger coordination than sitting in a chair. So as much as you can, get your torso into a place that feels like it's standing and floating, and see how that feels.